Standing on the porch of a mansion in Banana Island, David looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. His $500 silk shirt was plastered to his skin, torn at the shoulder. His shoes, once polished to a mirror shine, were caked in mud. He didn't have his car keys. He didn't have his phone. He didn't even have his dignity. Before we get into the incredible, heart-wrenching details of how David lost a multi-million-dollar empire in just 90 days and how the wife he discarded rose from the ashes to become the most powerful woman in the city, I want to welcome you to Modernist Africa Folktale, and right now I want you to do 3 things to help this community grow. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We release stories of justice and triumph every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Like this video and drop a comment below with the word loyalty. Let us know if you've ever been underestimated by someone you loved. Now let's go back to the story. He raised a trembling hand and knocked on the massive mahogany door. He waited. 3 months ago he had stood in a room just like this one, except he was the one holding the suitcases and he was the one doing the shouting. He had looked at the woman inside and told her she was expired. He told her she was dead. Wait. He told her that he deserved a trophy, not a relic. Now the door opened. A warm glow of yellow light spilled out onto the wet porch. The scent of expensive oud and home-cooked egusi soup drifted into the cold night. Ngozi stood there. She wasn't wearing the faded housecoat he remembered. He was draped in a silk kaftan that cost more than David's remaining bank balance. Her skin was glowing. She looked like a woman who had finally started breathing the moment he left the room. Ngozi, he whispered, his voice cracking. Please. I have nowhere else to go. She took everything. The house, the accounts, everything. Ngozi didn't move. She didn't let him in. She didn't even look angry. She looked at him with something far worse. Pity. David, she said, her voice as smooth as velvet. You told me 3 months ago that I was the anchor holding back your ship. Well, your ship has sailed. And it looks like you've hit the rocks. On this channel we believe in the law of the harvest. We believe that you cannot plant thorns and expect to reap lilies. Our stories are for the dreamers who have been told they aren't enough. Our stories are for the loyal souls who have been betrayed by the ones they built. If you believe that karma always finds the right address, then you are in the right place. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to the day the anchor was cut loose. To understand why David was begging in the rain, you have to understand where he started. 15 years ago, David and Ngozi lived in a room in Ajagunal that was so small they had to take turns standing up. David was a man with big dreams and empty pockets. He wanted to be a real estate mogul. He wanted his name on skyscrapers. But in those days, the only thing he had his name on was a pile of rejection letters. Ngozi was 22. She was beautiful, but it was a quiet beauty. She worked 3 jobs. She sold okrika clothes in the morning, she braided hair in the afternoon, and she did accounting for a local bakery at night. Every single kobo she made went into David's vision. She was the one who sold her mother's gold jewelry to pay for his first professional certification. She was the one who went without new shoes for 3 years so David could buy the suit he needed to look the part. One day, Ngozi, David would say, eating the small portion of rice she left for him while she claimed she wasn't hungry. One day I will buy you the world. And he did. Or so it seemed. By year 10 the vision became a reality. David Construction was the hottest name in Lagos. They moved from Ajagunal to Surulere, then to Lekki, and finally to the gated majesty of Banana Island. But as the house got bigger, David's memory got smaller. He started noticing things he never cared about before. He noticed that Ngozi's hands weren't as soft as the women he saw at the yacht club, because those hands had spent a decade scrubbing floors so he could study. He noticed that she didn't know the difference between a 1990 and a 2010 vintage wine, because she had spent a decade drinking tap water so he could afford business lunches. Then came Cynthia. Cynthia was 23, the same age Ngozi was when they started. But Cynthia didn't know what it was like to be hungry. She was a lifestyle influencer. How to contour her face, how to take the perfect selfie, and how to make a man Feel like he was the king of the world as long as his credit card didn't decline. David met her at a groundbreaking ceremony. She was the ribbon cutter. It smelled like expensive French perfume and ambition. When she looked at David, she didn't see the man who used to cry because he couldn't pay rent. So, billionaire. And she made sure he knew it. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow poison. It started with David coming home late. Then it was business trips to Dubai that Ngozi wasn't invited to. Then came the comments. Ngozi, why are you wearing that? It looks like something a villager would wear. Ngozi, stop talking about the old days. It's embarrassing. I'm a different man now. Ngozi tried. She really did. She went to the spas, she bought the designer bags. David threw at her to keep her quiet. But she couldn't hide the sadness in her face. And David hated that sadness. It reminded him of the debt he owed her, a debt he didn't want to pay. The breaking point came on their 15th anniversary. Ngozi had spent all day cooking David's favorite traditional meal. He had set the table with the fine china. He was waiting to celebrate the 15 years of sweat and tears that had built their life. David walked in at 11 p.m. He wasn't alone. He had a lawyer with him. He didn't eat the food. He didn't look at the candles. He just put a manila envelope on the table. I want a divorce, Ngozi, he said. He said it as casually as if he were ordering a coffee. Ngozi felt the air leave her lungs. David? What is this? Is it a joke? It's not a joke. It's evolution, David said, leaning against the marble counter she had picked out. We've outgrown each other. You're a great woman, really, but you belong to the past. You're the woman who helped me get here, but you aren't the woman who can go where I'm going next. Where you're going next. Ngozi whispered. David, we built this together. Every brick in this company has my sweat on it. David laughed. It was a cold metallic sound. On paper maybe. But I'm the face. I'm the brain. My lawyer has prepared a settlement. It's generous. The old house in the village and a few million. It's more than you ever had in Ajagunal. And who is she? Ngozi asked, her voice trembling. Her name is Cynthia. She's young, she's vibrant, and she understands the world I live in now. She doesn't look at me and see a poor boy from the slums. He's a titan. I need that energy. Ngozi looked at the man she had loved for 15 years. She realized she didn't recognize him. The man who used to share his last piece of meat with her was gone. In his place was a monster made of money and vanity. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. Not in front of him. She picked up the pen. The village house? She asked. Yes. And the old SUV, David said. I've already moved your things. Cynthia is moving in tomorrow. She wants to redecorate. She says the house feels dated. Ngozi signed the papers. As she handed them back, she looked David straight in the eye. David, a house built on sand cannot withstand the storm. You think you're a titan, but you've forgotten who held the shield while you slept. Take the village house. I'll take the old car. But remember this, when the storm comes, don't look for me. David just smirked. I won't have to. Titans don't worry about storms. Ngozi left that night. She drove that 10-year-old SUV to the only place she felt safe. The village house David thought was an insult. It was a modest property her grandmother had left her, located on the outskirts of a town known for its rich soil and ancient traditions. David called it a relic. To Ngozi it was a sanctuary. For the first month she did nothing but sleep and garden. He felt like a person who had survived a plane crash. She was numb. Every time she closed her eyes she heard David's voice. Expired. Dead weight. Dated. But Ngozi was the daughter of a woman who had raised 5 children by selling charcoal. Resilience was in her DNA. One afternoon, while clearing out the back shed of the village house, she found her grandmother's old stone grinders and a journal. It was filled with recipes not for food but for skincare. Her grandmother had been the village Onyocha, the one who made the oils and soaps that kept the women's skin looking like polished bronze even under the harsh sun. Ngozi looked at her own hands. They were dry, cracked from years of stress. It followed the recipe for a specific golden nut oil. She made a small batch. She used it for a week. The results were miraculous. The fine lines of stress began to fade. Her skin regained a luster she hadn't seen since her teenage years. She started making small jars and giving them to the women in the local market. "Ngozi, what is this magic?" they would ask. "My husband says I look 10 years younger." Ngozi realized something. In the city, people paid thousands of dollars for chemicals that didn't work. Here in the dated village, she had the secret to real beauty. She didn't have much money, but she had the $2 million settlement David had given her. A generous amount to him, but a fortune if used correctly. She didn't buy a new car. She didn't buy designer clothes. She bought land. She hired the local village women, the ones everyone else ignored, and built a small high-tech processing plant. She called the brand the Anchor. "Why call it that?" her foreman asked. "An anchor holds you back." "No," Ngozi said, looking at the first shipment of golden oil. "An anchor is the only thing that keeps you from being swept away when the ocean gets angry. The most important part of the ship." Ngozi wasn't just making soap. She was building an empire. But she did it quietly. No Instagram posts. No billboards. Just a product that was so good the world started coming to her door. Meanwhile, in Banana Island, David was discovering that energy was very expensive. David's life with Cynthia was exactly what he thought he wanted. Every day was a party. Every night was a gala. Cynthia was a master of spending money. She told David that to be a titan, he had to look like one. "This house is so boring, Dave," she would say, pouting her lip. "We need Italian marble. We need a glass-bottom pool. We need to host the governor." David, desperate to prove he wasn't the poor boy from the slums, said yes to everything. He felt powerful. He felt young. But there was a problem. David construction was a hands-on business. Required attention to detail, long hours, and the kind of steady, cautious accounting that Ngozi used to provide. Ngozi used to be the one who checked the contracts. She was the one who noticed when a supplier was overcharging by 5%. She was the one who reminded David to pay the tax man. Cynthia didn't check contracts. She checked the guest list for her birthday party. "Oh, don't be so boring, Dave," she'd say when he tried to look at his laptop. "The manager can handle it. Come dance." The manager, a man named Tund, saw that David was distracted. He saw that David was no longer looking at the books. So Tund started a business of his own inside David's company. He started siphoning funds. He signed contracts with shell companies. At the same time, Cynthia convinced David to invest in a once-in-a-lifetime cryptocurrency scheme her expert friends were running. "It's the future, Dave. You want to be a dinosaur or a titan?" David put $20 million into the scheme. It was money he had earmarked for a major government project, the Zion Bridge. 2 months after the divorce, the storm Ngozi predicted began to gather. The cryptocurrency scheme crashed. It wasn't a market dip. It was an exit scam. The expert friends disappeared. David's $20 million was gone in a single morning. David panicked. He went to the office to pull funds from the construction account to cover the loss. That's when he found Tund was gone too. And the company accounts were nearly empty. David sat in his leather chair, the one that cost $10,000, and felt a cold sweat break out. He realized he hadn't paid the subcontractors for the Zion Bridge in 6 weeks. The next day the workers walked off the site. The day after that, the government issued a stop work order and a massive fine for breach of contract. David went home, his head spinning, looking for comfort. He found Cynthia in the bedroom. She wasn't crying. He was packing. "Cynthia, what are you doing? I need to talk to you. We have a crisis." Cynthia didn't stop folding her designer dresses. "No, you have a crisis, Dave. I have a brand to protect." "What are you talking about?" "I saw the news, David. David Construction on the verge of bankruptcy. Government probes billionaire. My followers don't want to see a woman whose man is a failure. It's bad for my engagement." David stared at her. "I've spent $15 million on you in 3 months. I bought you a car. I bought your mother a house. And I gave you the best 3 months of your life," she said, snapping her suitcase shut. "Or even, oh, and by the way, I'm taking the car. The papers are my name. You were so vibrant when you signed them, remember? She walked out of the house without looking back. She didn't see a titan. Saw a sinking ship. David tried to fight. He sold his cars. He sold his watches. But the debt was a mountain and he was a man with a shovel. The bank moved in on the Banana Island mansion. He had leveraged it to try and save the bridge project. In 90 days, David went from the cover of business magazines to a man with a single suitcase standing on the street. His friends, the ones he hosted at his 5-star dinners, stopped picking up his calls. Sorry Dave, bad timing, they would say before hanging up. He was sitting in a cheap motel room eating bread and water when he saw a magazine on the floor. On the cover was a woman in a gold dress. She looked powerful. She looked serene. The headline read, "The Anchor. How Ngozi Mensah built a $100 million skincare empire in 90 days." David's heart stopped. He read the article. It talked about a secret organic formula that had taken the global market by storm. Talked about how the company was valued at 10 times what David Construction had been at its peak. But the part that broke him was the quote at the end. The interviewer had asked Ngozi, "What is the secret to your success?" Ngozi had replied, "I stopped building for people who didn't appreciate the foundation. I realized that a woman's worth isn't in who she stands behind, but in the ground she stands on." David looked at the date. The company had launched exactly 1 week after he kicked her out. She had been working on the anchors, while he was playing with energy. He realized then that the generous settlement he gave her hadn't been her end. It had been her seed money. He felt a desperate, ugly hope. "She loved me," he whispered to the empty, peeling walls of the motel. "She was loyal for 15 years. She won't let me starve. She's Ngozi. She's soft." He spent his last few naira on a bus ticket to the village. Which brings us back to the rain. David stood on the porch of the relic. But it wasn't a relic anymore. Ngozi had transformed the village house into a sprawling modern estate that managed to be both luxurious and soulful. The gardens were lush, the security was tight, and the air felt expensive. Ngozi stood in the doorway, looking at the man she used to call her husband. "Ngozi, please," David sobbed. "I was wrong. I was blinded. Cynthia, she was it. She took everything. I realized it too late. You're the only one who ever truly cared for me." Ngozi leaned against the doorframe. She didn't look like the woman who used to braid hair in Ajagunal. She looked like a queen. "David, you didn't realize anything," she said calmly. "You didn't come here because you realized my value. You came here because your value hit 0. There's a difference." "I'll do anything," David pleaded. "I'll work in the factory. Clean the floors. Just don't leave me out here. I have no one." "You have exactly what you asked for, David," Ngozi replied. "You wanted vibrance. You wanted the future. You wanted a woman who didn't remind you of where you came from." She stepped back, beginning to close the door. "Ngozi, wait!" David screamed, falling to his knees in the mud. 15 years. Doesn't 15 years mean anything? Ngozi paused. A flicker of something passed over her face, perhaps a memory of a shared meal in a tiny room in Ajagunal. "It means everything, David," she said softly. "Those 15 years taught me how to survive a man like you. They taught me that I am a builder. And a builder doesn't let a man who destroyed her first house move into her second one. Please. I'm hungry." Ngozi signaled to one of the security guards. "Give him a bag of rice and some oil," she said. "The Anchor brand. It's high quality. And give him 5,000 naira. It's more than we had when we started." The guard stepped forward with a small bag. "And then," Ngozi said, her voice turning to iron, "escort him to the gate. And make sure he understands. The anchor is dropped. The ship is gone." David sat in the mud, clutching a bag of rice with his ex-wife's face on the label. He looked at the massive gates of the estate. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glass, and now he was realizing that glass doesn't just shatter, it cuts. There is a proverb that says, "The man who leaves his house because the roof is leaking often finds himself in a forest where it never stops raining." David thought the woman who built him was a burden. He thought his success was His alone. He forgot that a tree only grows as high as its roots allow. When you cut the roots, the tree didn't just stop growing, it died. Ngozi's story is a reminder to every person listening. Your value does not decrease because someone is too blind to see it. Sometimes the best thing a person can do for you is leave so they can stop blocking your light. David spent that night in a local church, sleeping on a wooden bench. He had a bag of rice but no fire to cook it. He had money but nowhere to call home. Ngozi spent that night in her study looking over the expansion plans for her company in Europe. She didn't hate David. She didn't seek revenge. Revenge is for people who are still looking back. Ngozi was too busy looking at the horizon. This is the lesson of the anchor. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt like David or Ngozi, I want to hear from you. Do you think Ngozi was too harsh? Or do you think she gave him exactly what he deserved? In my opinion, mercy is for the repentant, but consequences are for the arrogant. David didn't want a wife, he wanted a ladder. And once he reached the top, he tried to kick the ladder away. He just didn't realize the ladder was the only thing holding him up. But the story of David and Ngozi has one more chapter. Because while David was sitting in that church, he met someone from his past, someone who knew the secret to why Tund had really robbed the company. And back at the estate, Ngozi received a phone call from a lawyer in the city. It turns out David's Titan status had left behind a legal mess that was about to land on Ngozi's doorstep, whether she wanted it or not. The payback was legendary, but the fallout? That was just beginning. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air was still thick. David was walking toward the bus station, his bag of rice slung over his shoulder, when a black Mercedes pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. It was Tund. Tund looked at David and laughed. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore, he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a gold chain. "Hey boss," Tund said, a cruel grin on his face. "Nice rice. I hear the anchor is very nutritious." David's eyes turned red with rage. You robbed me. I'll kill you." Tund didn't look scared. He leaned out the window. "I didn't rob you, David. Just took my commission. Do you know who gave me the codes to the offshore accounts? Do you know who told me when you'd be too busy with Cynthia to notice the transfers?" David froze. "It wasn't Cynthia," Tund whispered. "Cynthia is too stupid to use a calculator. It was someone else. Someone who wanted to make sure you didn't have a kobo left when you went back to her." Tund pulled away, throwing a cloud of dust into David's face. David stood there, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He turned and looked back toward the hills where Ngozi's estate stood. He had thought Ngozi was soft. He had thought she was just a quiet village girl. But as he looked at the bag of rice in his hands, he saw the logo of the anchor. It wasn't just a logo. It was a message. Ngozi hadn't just survived the divorce. She had orchestrated the downfall. A woman who can build an empire from nothing is a woman you should never, ever make an enemy. Because she knows exactly where the weak points in the foundation. Or, she's the one who put them there. David realized then that he wasn't just a victim of bad luck or a gold-digging mistress. He was a man who had tried to play chess with the woman who taught him the game. And he had just been checkmated. David didn't go back to the church. He didn't go to the bus station. He turned around and started running. He ran through the mud past the local farmers who looked at him with confusion, until he reached the high wrought iron gates of the Anchor estate once more. "Ngozi," he screamed, his voice raw. "Ngozi, come out. I know what you did." The security guards moved toward him, their faces stern, but a voice over the intercom stopped them. "Let him in," Ngozi said. The gates hummed open. David stumbled up the long, paved driveway. He didn't stop until he reached the front porch where Ngozi was waiting. She was holding a cup of tea, looking out at the sunset as if she were watching a movie she had already seen. "Tund," David panted, pointing a shaking finger at her. "I just saw Tund. He told me you were the one. You coached him. You told him when to strike. You destroyed me." Ngozi took a slow sip of her tea. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look silly. "I didn't destroy you, David," she said, her voice as calm as a still lake. "I simply withdrew my support. There is a difference." You robbed me of $20 million in crypto. Let Ton drain the construction accounts. Ngozi set her tea down on a glass table. She stood up and walked to the edge of the porch looking down at David. David, let's look at the numbers. You gave me $2 million as a generous settlement. But over 15 years I brought $40 million into that company through my accounting and my negotiations. I wasn't just your wife, I was your CFO, your strategist, and your shield. When you told me I was expired, I decided to take my portion of the harvest. You stole it. No, she said. I reclaimed it. I didn't tell Ton to steal. I simply stopped. Stopping him. I knew he was a snake. I had been keeping him in a cage for 5 years because I loved you. The moment you ended our marriage, I opened the cage. You were the one who chose to walk into it. David's legs buckled. He fell to the steps. And the crypto, he whispered. That was your vanity, Ngozi said. I didn't make you invest in a scam. I just knew that without me there to tell you no, your ego would say yes to anything that promised to make you look like a titan. You destroyed yourself, David. I just provided the mirror so you could watch it happen. She reached into the pocket of her kaftan and pulled out a legal document. And here is the final move. Your company didn't just go bankrupt. It was bought by a holding company based in London. David looked at the paper. His eyes widened. The holding company's name was the Anchor Global. I own your debts now, David, Ngozi said. I own the equipment. I own the remaining contracts. I even own that office chair you loved so much. You're standing on my land, breathing my air, and crying over a company that now belongs to the woman you called dead weight. David looked up at her, and for the first time in his life he saw her. Truly saw her. He saw the genius he had suppressed. He saw the power he had tried to claim as his own. What are you going to do to me? He asked, his voice a broken whisper. Ngozi looked at him. Not with hate. Not even with triumph. Just with a cold, professional finality. Nothing, she said. I'm going to do exactly what you did to me in Ajagunal. I'm going to let you live with the consequences of your choices. You can keep the 5,000 naira. You can keep the rice. But if you ever step foot on this property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing on a titan's land. She turned around and walked back into the house. The heavy mahogany door closed. With a sound like a gavel in a courtroom. David left the village that night. He didn't go back to the city. He couldn't. His name was a curse in the business world. Last we heard, David was working as a site laborer for a small construction firm. In the north. He spends his days carrying bags of cement. The same cement he used to buy by the ton. He sleeps in a shared room with 4 other men. His hands, once soft from driving luxury cars, are now covered in calluses and scars. Every evening when he sits down to eat his meager meal, he sees the face of the woman he discarded. She is on the news. She is on the billboards. He is the woman who turned a relic into a revolution. Cynthia? She moved on to a younger, richer tech boy within a month. He never mentioned David's name again. To her, he wasn't a person, he was just a season of high engagement. Ngozi Mensah is now the chairwoman of the largest construction and skincare conglomerate in West Africa. She didn't just rebuild her life, she built a world where loyalty is the highest currency. She spends her time building schools and hospitals, and every one of them is called the foundation. Because she knows that without a strong foundation, everything else is just a decoration waiting for the wind to blow. The story of David and Ngozi is not just a story about a divorce. It is a story about the blindness of pride. There is an African proverb that says, "The eye can see the hills, but it cannot see the eyelashes that are right in front of it." David was so busy looking at the hills of his ambition and the vibrance of his youth that he couldn't see the eyelash, the woman who was the very reason. He could see it all. He thought he was the sun and she was just a planet reflecting his light. He didn't realize that she was the gravity that kept him from flying off into the dark. To the men listening to this story, never mistake a woman's silence for weakness. Never mistake her loyalty for a lack of options. A woman who can build. A man can also unbuild him. Respect the hands that held you when you had nothing, or those same hands will be the ones that sign for your downfall. To the women listening to this story, if you are in your Ngozi season, if you are being undervalued, if you are being called expired or not enough, take heart. The anchor in you is not meant to hold you back. It is meant to ground you until the storm passes. Your value is inherent. It is built into your spirit, not into your husband's bank account. When they walk away, let them. They aren't taking your future with them. They are just clearing the space for your empire to grow. If this story hit home for you, if you've seen a David fall or a Ngozi rise, let us talk about it in the comments. What was the exact moment you knew David was doomed? Do you think Ngozi was right to let Tun drain the accounts? Before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We are a community of truth tellers, and we want you with us for every lesson, every triumph, and every legendary payback. Like this video to honor the loyal souls who finally found their worth. And remember, the world may watch what you do when everyone is looking, but karma watches what you do when you think no one is. This has been Modernist Africa Folktale. Keep your heart pure, your foundation strong, and your anchor dropped.